Today on my show, I'm talking to John McFadden from Ireland, who has MA in PR and music industry. John is working as a lecturer in music and media. He also worked as a music manager and in recent years got involved in organizing series of live music and industry-based discussions. My today's show is every musician's must watch as we dig deep into what every musician should concentrate on in these challenging times. Hello everybody, I have today a very good friend of mine, John McFadden, who working in the music business for a long time, and I have John huge amount of questions to you. Even I know you for many years, but about you and about what you do, and I'm sure lots of musicians would want to know as well, because we're all moving more into music business now, and you can share with us knowledge of what you do yourself. Just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where are you, and stuff like that.
Well, right now, due to COVID-19, I'm in my living room, which is quite nice, I have to be honest.
Nice and cozy.
Yeah, it's very cozy. There's a fire here to one side of me, and sitting in a nice armchair. So it's kind of good from that point of view. But yeah, because normally, Larissa, we'd probably be doing this in a studio somewhere. So
I suppose, yeah. You are originally from Midlands in Ireland, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm actually there at the moment. I'm speaking to you from Offaly at the moment. Now, if you were to take a step back, I was actually born in Manchester. And that probably has a relationship as into why I suppose I'm involved in the music industry. In fact, one of the people, well, actually, allegedly I was in the same class as Liam Gallagher.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it's kind of an interesting link. But I'm very good friends with Tony McCarroll, the original drummer from Oasis. So that would have been an influence for myself, even kind of in the teenage years, sort of seeing friends, have success in the industry, particularly when at that point in time, they were in one of the biggest bands in the world, Oasis, so that was a huge, impact. So yeah, I like that, born in Manchester, but I've been living in Offaly since my parents moved over. I was about 7 or 8 when we moved over to Ireland. So what started you in music business? Were you interested in music as a musician as well, or you always was interested in the kind of business side? How did you start at all to get involved? As a teenager, it happened kind of by accident. There was our local, if you like, at the parish hall at the time, there was somebody running this kind of like disco. Mm-hmm. And I just went up at the stage, and I was speaking to the DJ at the time. Actually, the DJ at the time was a girl called Sandra Peavoy, and so I was chatting to her. And at that time, there were other people in the audience who assumed that I was one of the DJs that night. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, they asked me, would I run a disco one night? And I suppose it kind of always been the little bit of a kind of, sure, look at why not? I said, yeah, absolutely. And that was how I started. So I kind of started as a DJ. Now, at that point in time, I'd already got a part-time job. I was working in an electronic shop in the local town. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of surrounded by sort of electronic goodies anyway. Mm-hmm. So there was a kind of a broader, I suppose, environment of music and entertainment around me at that time.
You were a techie guy then. You always was in the technical, you were interested in all the technical stuff then since a young age, is it?
Absolutely. Well, even when you think about it, with somebody who'd come in and they'd want to buy, say, speakers. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things I would have learned very quickly was how to listen to the different quality of speakers, where you could hear the extra backing tracks, maybe like little jingles on songs that you wouldn't hear, on a kind of on a cheaper speaker. You just simply don't hear them, don't have the range. So kind of that was, I suppose, another side of it that was linked into music, but as you said, on sort of tech side. So I learned how to listen in that context at that time. Yeah.
That's a very valuable quality, John, because most people just like myself, I'm more creating. I can't really listen. I know that people kind of divided by this time. It's people who can listen are very valuable, because that's where opinions coming from, So anyway, you were doing the DJing, and then how did it grow into some sort of working professionally in the music business from there?
Yeah, so I was involved in, I used to earn as much when I was DJing as I would for a whole week, at that point in time. However, I then sort of moved away from that and kind of thought, look, I better get serious about, dare I say, having a career. So I went off and I worked in a number of jobs. I ended up then studying in college. And then my focus became, surely enough, came back to music management. So I started on PR and the events work. So I ended up anyway going to college. I finished up with this MA in PR in the music industry, and that's where the
What
focus.
college was that, John?
That was DIT at the time. Of course, it'd be the Technical University of Dublin now. And that was, it's good, nearly 20 years ago. Since
did you feel, I didn't even know 20 years ago we had courses like this. And did you feel you benefit from this education? Like, would you advise people actually to go and get an education in the music business?
Oh, 100%, because it will give you a framework of understanding. Like, for example, how many people still to this day, people possibly who are listening, and they're saying they will use the words manager, agent, and promoter all interchangeably, and they're all very defined roles. Do you know? And even kind of getting the very basic framework, the very basic structure, you get that. But the other thing that you get is you learn how the industry works, and in addition to that, you get to network. That's really important, kind of getting to know who people are, and also you get to know people's reputations and who you can trust and who maybe to steer away from. So you get that there. I think the great thing in the last probably the last 15 years in music industry education in this country is that there are so many colleges running so many courses, which I think is fantastic because it's changed the level of how people interact in the industry. But it's also, there was a lot of people years ago who were very good at, writing good songs and maybe doing very good recordings, but they weren't very good at excellent. And I think the colleges have brought that up a notch. So you see certain colleges now and you see that their students are going on, they're having successful careers, in the music industry. And I think that's truly, phenomenal. And it's based on having a framework because it's a really, really tough industry. It really is.
It is. I'm trying to disagree with this all the time because every time anybody says that it's hard, I say, no, it's not hard. I just enjoy it so much, I try not to think about it.
All that stuff.
Attitude to get an enjoyment out of it, because I think because it's a business now and we all kind of trying to run it on our own at the moment.
Right.
The way it's going, if you just concentrate on toughness of us, the creativity and enjoyment kind of then disappears on the way. I feel it's pity that this is happening.
I think a lot of it's got to do with as well framing and how you frame things in your mind. Like, whilst, I'd be the first, obviously, would say it's a very tough industry. But if you look at all them, and you will get huge knockbacks, and anyone who is successful now has had nothing, only knockbacks. But sometimes you might need to have, if you like, 90 knockbacks in 100 to get 10 that lead somewhere. And I think that's fine. But if you frame the 90 as steps to the 10 successful ones, I think that's okay. I do think fundamentally, though, because you've touched on it, I think we don't maybe spend enough talking about that. There has to be an element of fun, and the creative and creativity side of it is really vital and important. Because the music industry is ultimately all about one thing: songs. And sometimes people tend, they don't talk enough about the actual song, the song that changes the person's mood, emotion. And if your song can change somebody's mood and emotion, well, you're successful already by doing it.
That's it.
Do you know what I mean? And then hopefully the industry bring that song out and share that, emotion with the listeners.
Listen, John, so you finished that degree, you said it's nearly 20 years ago. And then did you go to work as a manager with artists after that? Or did you start to teach? What happened after the education?
It was both. And I really kind of think it's exactly what you should be doing. I was a manager whilst I was in college. And I was also then, what it ended up happening was, and how I actually got the first job in education, was I was actually working for the PR Institute. And the deputy principal at the time rang the PR Institute because the college that I ended up working in had a course that was certified by the PRI. And he just said to me on the phone call, he said, "Are you the same John McFadden that used to be a student here?" I said, yeah, I'm of course, yeah. And he says, what are you doing? And I says, I'm finishing up a master's in PR and the music industry. So there's a little bit of opportunistic timing here for me, because I think he knew that the person who is the course director of the PR diploma was potentially going to be retiring in the next year. But also they were delivering music industry and they couldn't get anyone to teach. Would you imagine that they couldn't get anybody to deliver the music industry on a number of courses? And he says to me, would you be able to teach 2 hours a week of music industry studies? And in my head, I won't lie, Larissa, I thought, you're going to pay me to talk about what I love. Do you know what I mean?
Great, isn't it?
Oh, it was amazing. And basically what happened was the two of them fed into each other. So I had the experience from being a manager, and then, if you like, studying the subject again to teach the subject meant I was a better manager, because I was bringing that in, and I was bringing what I was learning as a manager into the classroom. So I think I was very lucky that the two things happened at the same time.
It was we were lucky because you combined theory and practice, isn't it? And it was enriching one another, both parts of this. Great, very
absolutely
good. Who was you managing that time?
I was managing a guy at that time called Simon Cunningham, and later on from Simon I would have managed another act called James O'Connor.
Once upon a time in a fairy tale, we followed love like the Holy Grail. We made our way through the cold and dark. We found our feet and we left our mark. We are the stories of young and old, stories of people who were brave and bold. Stories like yours, stories like mine. We are the stories we leave behind. Whoa. We are the stories we leave behind. Whoa. We are the stories we leave behind. Some days we act like we're deaf, dumb and blind. We are the products of our own design, selling this world at our own expense, screaming in vain, sitting on the fence. We are the stories captured in song, voices of spirits from the great beyond, stories that lasted the test of time. We are the stories we leave behind. Whoa. We are the stories we leave behind. Whoa. We are the stories we leave behind. Whoa. We are the stories we leave behind. We lose the plot, forget the signs, when we're not reading between the lines. We make our choices, we take the risks. We are by nature dramatic twists. We are the stories you share around, stories of lives in an average town, stories of hearts that are intertwined. We are the stories we leave behind. Whoa. We are the stories we leave behind. Whoa. We are the stories we leave behind. Whoa. We are the stories we leave behind.
Now, I had some chart success with James, and I also worked with a band from Kilkenny called The Fundamentals. They're kind of they were a great pop rock band, kind of sounded like the Killers. And yeah, we put out a few records with them as well. And there was very, very, very minor, but there was a small little imprint on the charts with them. It was a shame it wasn't more, because it deserved to be a lot more.
I actually like them. I listened to music after reading your bio. I listened to them. They're very good.
They were great.
Very good.
No, they went on to be very successful individually. You know, so you have the lead singer has a great production company out there, more in the visual arts. David Dooley. The drummer, Davey, is the drummer with the Kilkennys, and he does a lot more solo projects as well. And the keyboard player went on and he redid a remix for Professor Green. I think, God, I don't know, was it 5 years ago now, or maybe more even. So there was a lot of success individually as well within that act. But they were really, and they were so easy to deal with. And then, of course, James obviously had a few. Well, we did a lot with James. Had a huge amount of gigs, tours. We did tours of Ireland, England, even some shows in the States way back when. So that was a great experience too.
Shadow you as you walk out on the ledge. Replayed that scene in your head, and the concrete monster holds his breath. Such a price to pay for a moment lost. I can't turn around to face the cost. Though I run into an empty space, well, it follows, but I walk away. It's a universal trait, a habit you'll never break. Could you relate? Why everyone makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Destined to repeat it over again. How many times before I really learn? Will you be the ones to say I told you so? Past judgment, just let it go. I can't promise it won't happen again. Lord, I'm trying to make amends. Your friends got nothing good to say. They don't make mistakes, now do they? It's a universal trait, a habit you'll never break. Could you relate? Why everyone makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Well, I can see her from here. She puts her hands through her hair. Over her shoulder, eyes follow me into memory. They say forgive and forget. She remembers everything. She thinks that I'm so fake. I just made a mistake. Well, it's a big mistake. It's a big mistake. Yeah, it's a big mistake. Yeah, we all make mistakes.
Very used to.
So how long was it going on? How long were you working as a manager?
I suppose in totality, if you were to put them and run them concurrently, I was managing with James for 5 years. Fundamentals was less, and Simon was less again. So I suppose you were looking at about a decade's worth of music management. So in that time period, you very quickly got to know quickly. Yeah, absolutely. And how the industry worked, and truly terrific.
Do you think, just to bring you away a little bit from all, I know because you so much experience, at the current situation when the music business kind of record companies nearly collapse and every singer has to build up their own career and stuff like that, do we still need managers? And who you said the three major people: manager, booker, and who else? Three of them.
The promoters.
Yeah. Do we still need 3 of them, or who we can eliminate one of them? What's your opinion on that?
I think you can't really eliminate, because they all do very different jobs. It's obviously the same industry, but realistically speaking, sometimes the manager, particularly if you're an independent artist and you've got your own independent label, maybe the manager is one of the people who's going to be able to guide you towards what songs should be put out, mainstream. Yeah. Sometimes acts release songs for so many different reasons, for different targets. Sometimes the artist not sometimes, a songwriter is going to be attached to their song because it has a meaning to them that we may not.
Very hard to be a right judge for your own music, isn't it? Very difficult.
Well, I remember once upon a time, and even as a manager, I remember an early version of a song with James called Mr. Fake, and we had some great success with that. I remember I heard one of the early demos of that, and it was actually one of James's friends, Brian, said this back to me. I didn't even remember it until he pointed it out to me. But I listened to the song, and I listened to it as a manager. I didn't listen to it as a friend of the act. I listened purely as a manager. And would this be something that could be played on radio? Was this something that could be successful? Was it potentially a single? And whatever I said to him at the time, I said, yeah, I think that's good. I think you need to shorten that, cut that piece out, and I think you've got a great song. Now, I couldn't tell you exactly how I said that or the order I said it in, but the artist took that on board, went away, and then we brought it to a great production company, a production team, Chris O'Brien and Graham Murphy, in a production suite up in Dublin. And they got that song, and they turned that, ultimately, they put their magic dust on it, and they turned it into the song that ended up in the charts. Now, I actually didn't recall me being so, if you like, cruel on the artist's song. But one of the things, anytime I ever heard an artist song for the first time in demo form, I would listen to it like that a couple of times, and I'd give the feedback very quickly, because even me as a manager would find myself getting emotionally attached to the song, and then I'm becoming biased emotionally. Whereas really, from that point of view, you need to be kind of very cruel and say, look, this is what, if this is what you're doing in this time period for this audience, that's what we got to do. So maybe artists may not be as good at that. Now, many artists are very good, even retrospectively, at becoming managers because they've gone through that process themselves. But then if you look at what, booking agents do, a booking agent will then take on an act and see, can they get that act to be taken on various shows, maybe of a tour over a certain time period. So they'll put feelers out to promoters, from small ones to major ones in Ireland, across Europe, across the world, through to the States. And then the promoter picks up on those acts based on, I suppose, the relationship they have with the agent. And they decide, can we sell X amount of tickets for this act in certain territories? Now, obviously, nowadays, that's easier with metrics that you can get, say, for example, as an artist, on the like Spotify. You can sort of see where the peaks and troughs are of where you're successful.
Yeah, where your music more popular, is it, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, So I think if you look at it that way, so managers have different roles, agents have different roles, and promoters, and they're all very, very, very different. So I think they are still needed. In fact, Larissa, sadly, it's like a lot of things. If you've got a good agent and you're an unknown act, if that agent has some powerhouse, big brand names behind them, they'll be able to do deals with promoters. So, and unfortunately, I think that's still why there are a small amount actually of major organizations, be it record labels, be it promoters, and indeed agents, because I suppose there's only room for X amount who can do things extraordinarily well.
from the height. Great tumbler pigeons perform somersaults, clapping their wings through the working class walls. Back gates and laneways, mad dogs and stray cats. Mattresses, wheelie bins, bikes and black sacks. Bowels of the neighborhood nobody wants. Garnish the beat to the working class walls. The working class walls. It gets up your nose. The working class walls. It sticks to your clothes. The working class walls. Gets under your skin. The working class walls is born from within. Shuffling with babies, soiled nappies and prams. Young single parents, cigarettes in their hands. No aspirations and no second thoughts. Comfortably numb in the working class walls. The working class walls. It ebbs and it flows. The working class walls. Reclines and regrows. The working class walls. Never wants you to win. The working class walls is born from within. Tracksuits and hoodies who procrastinate. Council house backdrops are sealing their fate. Laying down bricks to build mental walls. A fortress of pride in the working class walls. The working class walls. It gets up your nose. The working class walls. It clings to your clothes. The working class walls. It gets under your skin. The working class walls is born from within. The working class walls is born from within.
Of course, yeah, of course. Okay, so what are you doing now at the moment, John? Are you still teaching in the college? Is it? And which college? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm still in Dún Laoghaire and doing a number of different subjects within there. And then on occasions, I pop up in the sound training college in various configurations, whether it's kind of like as a guest lecturer or one of the most recent thing being nearly a year ago now, when we had an In Conversation event with Dr. Phil Harding.
Can you tell me more about this? Because I was trying to find more information about what was that about, who is he, what was the sessions.
Well, Phil, what a terrific man, and a mindful of information. He is a pop and rock producer. Now, he had a huge amount of success working with PWL, which would have been Pete Waterman's label, as part of the production team for Stock Aitken Waterman, or SAW.
Wow.
So they would have had, I think they've sold, roughly speaking, around 50 million records. And as a result of that, Phil had worked with, not only purely within Stock Aitken and Waterman, but with other organizations that he worked with. He'd worked with acts all the way from, say, Depeche Mode to all the Stock Aitken Waterman people, which would be your Kylie Minogue, Jason Donovan, Rick Astley, Bananarama. So he produced, remixed, engineered on so much music within them that we thought this would be a great man to have an In Conversation event about. And Phil, retrospectively, in some ways, I suppose, he wrote a number of books, and he had a book out. Well, he's a couple of books out, but he had one out, say, last year. And as a result of having that book out, pop music production, I thought, let's get him in to talk about his career, because it's very fresh in your mind, because he could talk about the whole recording process. In other words, literally how you could increase the chances of having a hit. That was, one of the reasons why we brought him over. But also he had great stories, because he could talk about, Pete Burns from Dead or Alive, putting Band-Aid 2 together, and share these sort of, insights that he had. Yeah, so that's why we brought Phil over. And it's a fantastic event, great night. And the idea was to do more of these conversations.
Was it live in auditory? Is it sitting in the auditory with people listening?
Yeah. So what we did was, I've been at a lot of kind of In Conversation events myself over the years, and I liked them a lot. Running up to the event, we looked for online questions from people who were not going to attend the event, who wanted to find out something. And then also at the end, which is, I think, the great part of live events, be it music, be it an In Conversation, there was questions from the audience. So that whole event that night it was both filmed and audio recorded, literally runs for nearly 3 hours.
Yeah. Which leads us actually very much to, would you believe that 35 years ago this week, You Spin Me Around was actually #1? Does that shock anybody in the room? It certainly shocks me, because I'm only 24. So recently, Phil was doing a piece on TV on Virgin Media 1. Don't know if any of you saw it. And James Kavanagh, one of the hosts on the 6 o'clock show, asked, what was Pete Burns, the singer from Dead or Alive, like to work with?
He was quite something. He was he lived the personality that we saw in videos, in performances. He must have come out of it at some point when he got home and went to bed.
Imagine we probably do something. It's nearly, in March, it'll be a year. So it would be kind of logical that we'll probably put something out.
Would be nice. It would be very interesting. John, tell me, please. I have a very good friend of mine, Anthony Sullivan, who works for me and helps me so much. And I mean, he's a dear friend of mine at this stage, and most people I work with are my friends. So I've heard you worked with him as well. What did you do? Tell me about this project.
Yeah, myself and Anthony, we go back a long way, because we actually would have worked together in a record store. But in addition to that, you might have heard me saying earlier on about the In Conversation events. The In Conversation events is between Tony and myself, and exactly as you're saying in terms of the experience, you couldn't get somebody who's more trustworthy. You couldn't get somebody who's more hardworking.
Yep.
And once he gets involved in a project, he goes and he believes in it all the way through. Like when we worked on the In Conversation event with Phil Harding, I've actually forgotten the amount of media coverage that we got. Phil flew over from London to do TV, radio. He was on Virgin Media. He was on Midlands 103 FM. He was on, I've forgotten some of the Dublin ones. He's on Dublin South as well. And he was He was all over the Star. Actually, I should give a shout out to Mark in the Star, who covered Phil's event numerous times. Hot press. He was in all these things, and a lot of that has come from work with people who are great to work with, such as Anthony Sullivan. So, and I don't want to just put him across as a media person, because it was way more than the media, because there was the whole event side of this as well. I should also mention, whilst I'm talking about that particular event that was run in the Sound Training College, we got great support from them as well. And they let Johnny, who recorded it, and also Cathal Eli, who years ago I was in school with in Birr, many moons ago, who became a student of mine, who then became the manager in the Sound Training College. So this industry is very small, and
isn't it?
You never know when your student becomes your boss.
And tell me, there is another thing in your biography I was reading about the friend of you from Oasis. You hooked him in with some musicians for the tour, for the Oasis anniversary tour. What's that about? Tell me about that, John.
Yeah, that was earlier on I made reference to knowing Tony McCarl, the original drummer. So it was 25 years anniversary of their first album, Definitely Maybe. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, obviously I've been in contact with Tony all my life, and I'll be good friends as well with Mark Downing from AMA agency there, which will be based in the Dalkey. And I was talking to Mark, of course, was a drummer himself before he was in the music world, the music industry. Mm-hmm. And so I put Tony and Mark together, and they devised this tour, which is basically the Definitely Maybe podcast tour. So again, it was not necessarily unlike what I would have done by interviewing Phil Harding, whereas Tony came over and he did an in-conversation event. We did a tour of them. One of them, the Irish one, was done in the Sugar Club in Dublin. I think, you know what, Larissa, I think that's nearly 2 years ago now.
Yeah, well, time is flying now anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, he used to do more of those shows, but like all of us, the live scene has, well, it's grinded to a halt.
It is, yeah, to nothing at the moment anyway. What do you think about all the situation now? What are you in lockdown yourself? Are you still teaching somehow, John? What are you doing?
Purely remotely. I've been remote since September. From my point of view, and from what all I can do is base it on the metrics, and I'm getting great participation. The results are probably higher than I've ever had any other year. I would love to say that's all me. I think it's partially got to do with the fact that there isn't as many distractions, so people are very focused. I
give yourself some credit. It's you. Thank you,
Larissa.
Of course.
Thank you.
You're very good. I'm sure you're a great teacher, because the way you speak and everything.
Thank you. So nice to hear.
And tell me, John, I just want your opinion on, very interesting. I would actually like you to do something maybe online for people, for musicians, if they can. Would it be one-to-one consultation or something like that with advisory? I'd say that would work very, very well, because you see what happened, John, most musicians, not everybody very techy as like yourself and me. I'm good, like I must say, in this. But most musicians not, and they got kind of lost. They don't know what to do. I know that sometimes we will get back to live singing, but in the meantime, what do you think? If you would be a musician now, what would you do? What would you concentrate on? What would be your advice to musicians to do now?
The first thing is, if you're the musician, the artist, don't lose sight of if you're the songwriter, that is, don't lose sight of writing great songs. I think now is a great time to be writing amazing, great songs. I think, there's time to do it. I think there's also, if I'm kind of cruel, maybe, it's kind of like write a song a day, and, some of them won't be great. But if you write a song a day, by the end of the pandemic, you're going to have 300 songs. There'll be some great ones in there. Mm-hmm. I think the other side is they can still carry on and keep looking and watching and studying the industry. Yeah. Even myself, there's so much I need to catch up on. I think in the last week, there's been that much going on with Cobalt looking like they're selling out, with Universal Music taking their music away from, it's not TikTok, it's similar to TikTok, an app called Triller. There's a lot of things like that I think you need to understand this industry that you're in. You need to be thinking about when it reopens, what opportunities are going to be there. Now, sadly, I think a lot of people who even work in the live side, themselves don't know. There's still, there are people advertising shows that are going to happen this summer.
I see.
Are they going to happen?
It's not going to happen, isn't it? I don't believe it's going to happen this summer. Not at all.
So I think it's not a great time for that, but it's a great time for you to be making sure your songs are great, making sure that you have your plan in place. So, for example, if you are thinking about putting a release out, an in-between release, make sure that all your social medias are up to date for whoever your target audience is. So if you're focused purely on Facebook, that would suggest to me that it's an older demographic that you're looking at. Whereas if you're putting out something or aiming to put something out on some of the other platforms, whether it's Instagram or even trying to put something out with TikTok, it's kind of okay, you're looking at a younger demographic. So I think now is the time to understand fully how the industry
who are your listeners are and how industry works. And tell me, for example, okay, see, there is two directions then. If I'm at home, sitting at home, musician and songwriter, concentrate on my creativity, which is great, and educate yourself. So if I want to, for example, I'm this artist like that, I want to educate, where would you advise me to go? Do you have any sources that you think people can go to listen to podcasts or whatever? Do you listen to anything that you can advise artists to go to?
I do. There's lots of things that you can sign up to. One that's great, but it's a paid for service in the UK is Music Week, obviously. There's a huge amount of resources in Ireland itself. Like, there's a lot of resources available on the likes of the official channels, things like IMRO, and there's a lot of fact sheets and things that you can delve into there, if you're a member. Also, there's another organization which I get an awful lot of updates upon. They're very, very accurate, very up to date, would be Music Business Worldwide. So you get a lot of what's happening there as well. There's a variety. They do a podcast as well. So I think you'll get a lot of industry stuff there. There are still a lot of, there's still a lot to be said for probably taking on a formal course somewhere where they start at the beginning and work your way through. In the industry, and it is an industry, and even if you're a rock act, rock acts don't tend to just rock up, look the way you do, and do a great interview, whether it's on radio or television, without being well rehearsed and well prepared. Nowadays, you will notice, pick any act who are promoting any release as the downside of the internet. And if you find their recordings, be it a TV thing that's been put up on YouTube retrospectively, or maybe even something that you listen back to in terms of a radio show, when they're promoting a single or an album or a tour, you will notice that the conversation is nearly always around the same few key points. So they'll mention the name of the single a number of times. They'll mention the name of the tour. They'll mention that they're performing somewhere. They're literally kind of repeating what's on the press release. Now, years ago, you wouldn't have noticed that because we didn't have the internet to check. But you will notice that. So make sure that I think that people know that the industry works in that way, that it's your fans want to hear you, but you want to make sure you get the message across. There's no point in doing an interview and people saying, that's been a great interview there that Larissa has done. What was she promoting? You didn't know. Also, I suppose sometimes what's the point in doing the interview unless you have something to promote? Hence why, certain rock acts, I won't name anyone in this. If I was probably in a live conversation over a cup of coffee, I'd name somebody right now. One particular frontman of one particular band always has an opinion when he's got a new album out, whereas he never seems to have an opinion when nothing else is happening.
It's a good way to bring attention, isn't it?
This is it. It's like we'll mention this thing that's somewhat controversial, but yet not dangerous enough to alienate the fan base. But then the media will pick up on this and say, John McFadden says whatever, and all of a sudden then it'll be
they have new release as well on the
exactly.
I got it.
Piggybacking on somebody else's.
Interesting.
So that kind of thing, you can get all that into
great conversation. Listen, I've really enjoyed it myself, and if anybody wants to ask John questions, you ask him. If anybody wants to follow John, are you on Facebook? Are you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. You'll find me. You'll ultimately find me, I'd say, on all the platforms if you go looking.
Great, lovely to have this chat with you, John. Thank you very much for taking your time and tuning in with me, and I'm sure that musicians will enjoy this conversation very, very much.
I hope so,
Thank
Larissa.
you.
Thanks a million for having me here.
Bye.
See ya.
If God will let me live another year, I'll start to hug you 100 times a day. I'll stay around, I'll never go away. I'll savor every moment when you're near. If God will let me live another year. If God will let me live another day, I'll start to think before I drop the word. I will be conscious that my words can hurt. I'll find time to meditate and pray. If God will let me live another day. If God will let me live another hour, I'll watch the stars and tell you I'm in love. This love so huge, it's like the skies above. I'll hear the birds and I will smell the flowers. If God will let me live another hour, I'll hear the birds and I will smell the flowers. If God will let me live another year, if God will let me live another day, if God